The imperial harem of the Ottoman Sultan. The words themselves conjure images of unimaginable luxury, of silk pillows and jewel-encrusted walls, a paradise of beautiful women devoted to the pleasure of a single, all-powerful man. It's a fantasy that has captivated the world for centuries, a place of seduction, romance, and ultimate privilege. But what if that fantasy is a lie? What if behind the gilded screens and perfumed air, the harem was not a paradise, but a prison built of gold? A place where a young woman's first night with the Sultan, a night supposedly of ultimate honor, was actually a moment of profound and paralyzing fear. Forget everything you think you know. Today, we peel back the layers of myth to uncover the terrifying truth of why women in the Sultan's harem dreaded their first night. The journey into terror began long before a woman ever saw the Sultan. Most women in the harem were not there by choice. They were captured in war, sold by impoverished families, or given as political gifts. One day, a girl could be living in a village in the Caucasus or a town in Eastern Europe, the next, she was the property of an empire. Imagine being torn from your home, your family, and everything you've ever known. You don't speak the language, you don't understand the culture, and you are surrounded by strangers. You arrive at the gates of the magnificent Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, but it doesn't feel like a palace, it feels like the end of your world. This initial trauma was the foundation of their fear. They were stripped of their names, their religion, and their past. They were given a new Turkish name and forced to convert to Islam. Their entire identity was erased and rebuilt to serve a single purpose, pleasing the Sultan. This wasn't an honor, it was the systematic dismantling of a human soul. The Sultan may have been the master of the empire, but within the walls of the harem, another power reigned supreme, the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother. She was the absolute matriarch, the manager, the puppet master. Nothing happened without her knowledge and approval. From the selection of new girls to the administration of the harem's vast wealth and political influence, her word was law. For a new girl, the Valide Sultan was a figure of immense fear and awe. Her gaze could make or break a woman's entire future. Gaining her favor could lead to a life of comfort and influence. Earning her displeasure could mean being relegated to a lifetime of menial servitude, or worse, being quietly married off to a minor official and exiled from the palace forever. The first night with the Sultan was not just about him, it was a test set by his mother. A girl had to prove she was worthy, not just as a lover, but as a potential pawn in the Valide Sultan's intricate political games. The pressure to impress this formidable woman was often more terrifying than the prospect of meeting the Sultan himself. The harem was not a sisterhood, it was a brutal, competitive hierarchy. A new girl, or odalskew, started at the absolute bottom. Above her were the trainees, the concubines who had caught the Sultan's eye, Gzd, those who had borne him a child, Iqbal, and at the very top, the official wives or consorts. This ladder was treacherous, and every rung was fiercely contested. The only way to climb was to be chosen by the Sultan and, ideally, to bear him a son. A woman's entire value was tied to this single function. Her first night was her one and only chance to make an impression. If she failed, she might never get another opportunity. She would be lost in the sea of hundreds of other beautiful women, destined to live out her days in obscurity. The fear of failure wasn't just about disappointment, it was the fear of a life sentence in the shadows of the palace. Before a woman was ever considered for the Sultan's bed, she underwent years of rigorous training. This wasn't just about looking pretty. She was taught Turkish, calligraphy, embroidery, how to play musical instruments, and how to dance. But most importantly, she was taught the art of pleasing a man. These lessons were incredibly detailed, covering everything from how to walk, how to speak, how to serve coffee, and, of course, the intimate arts of the bedchamber. This training was a double-edged sword. While it prepared her, it also built up the monumental pressure of the first night. She had been trained for years for this one performance. A single mistake, a moment of awkwardness, or a failure to enchant the most powerful man in the world could render all that effort meaningless. She was trained not just to be a lover, but a performer, and her first night was the opening night of a show that would determine the rest of her life. The most immediate and constant source of fear came from the other women. In a world where hundreds of women competed for the attention of one man, jealousy was a weapon. Rivals would stop at nothing to sabotage a girl who was chosen for the Sultan's bed. Stories are told of poison being slipped into food, of vicious rumors being spread to the Valite Sultan, and even of physical attacks in the bathhouses. A woman walking to the Sultan's chambers for the first time knew that dozens of eyes were watching her, filled with envy and malice. She wasn't just walking towards a potential future of glory, she was walking through a minefield of 100 other ambitions. The fear of being sabotaged by her sisters was just as real as the fear of displeasing the Sultan. Privacy did not exist in the harem. The entire complex was guarded and administered by the chief black eunuch, the Smed. He and his army of eunuchs were the Sultan's eyes and ears. They controlled all access to the harem, managed the women's daily lives, and reported every whisper and secret back to the Valite Sultan. From the moment a woman was chosen, she was under constant surveillance. The eunuchs escorted her through the palace, observing her every move, her demeanor, her poise. They were the gatekeepers to power. This constant, unnerving scrutiny would strip away any sense of self. It was a psychological pressure cooker, designed to ensure absolute obedience and conformity. A woman knew that any sign of fear, reluctance, or defiance would be noted and could seal her fate before she even reached the Sultan's door. The moment of the summons was itself a terrifying event. A woman wouldn't receive a gentle invitation. Instead, a message would be delivered, and she would be expected to begin her preparations immediately. The path she walked from the harem to the Sultan's private chambers was known as the Alt-Nayal, or the Golden Road. For a new girl, this walk must have felt like a mile-long journey to her own execution. It was a silent, torch-lit procession, escorted by eunuchs. The weight of expectation, the years of training, the hopes of her patrons, and the jealousy of her rivals all culminated in this single, silent walk. Every step down that marble corridor was a step further away from the life she knew and deeper into an uncertain, dangerous future. The silence would have been deafening, filled only with the sound of her own racing heart. Finally, she would arrive at the Sultan's chambers. And here lay the ultimate fear, the Sultan himself. This was not a character from a romance story. He was an absolute monarch with the power of life and death over everyone in his empire, including her. Some sultans were known to be kind and gentle poets, but others were known for their violent tempers, bizarre proclivities, or sheer cruelty. The woman had no idea which man she would meet. Would it be a tender lover or a brutal tyrant? She had no right to refuse him, no right to voice discomfort. She was, in that moment, completely and utterly at his mercy. Her life's training was to please this man, regardless of her own feelings, her own fear, or her own pain. The psychological terror of submitting her body and will to a complete stranger, who held absolute power over her very existence, is almost impossible for us to comprehend today. It was the ultimate gamble, with her life and sanity as the stakes. The fear didn't end when the night was over. The morning after was its own trial. If the Sultan was pleased, he would send gifts of fine fabrics, jewels, and money to the woman the next day. This was a public declaration of her success. She would instantly rise in the harem's hierarchy, earning a new title, better quarters, and the respect or intensified jealousy of her peers. But what if no gifts arrived? Silence was a verdict. It meant she had failed. She would be returned to the ranks of the other concubines, branded by her failure. The shame and humiliation would be unbearable. She would be a ghost in the palace, a living symbol of inadequacy, with no hope of ever being summoned again. The morning was the final judgment, determining whether her night of terror would lead to a lifetime of power or a lifetime of obscurity and regret. So, the first night in the Sultan's harem was far from a fairy tale. It was a terrifying culmination of trauma, pressure, and political maneuvering. It was a high-stakes test of a woman's ability to survive in a gilded cage where her entire worth was defined by one man's pleasure. The fear was born from the loss of freedom, the crushing weight of the hierarchy, the constant surveillance, the venomous rivalries, and the terrifying uncertainty of the Sultan himself. It was a night that could make an empress or break a soul. What do you think was the most terrifying aspect of harem life? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this glimpse behind the veil of history fascinating, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more hidden stories. Don't forget to share it with anyone who loves to uncover the dark truths behind popular myths. Thanks for watching.